Wow, you weren't kidding about these accident reports. This is, it's heavy stuff.
It is, yeah. Each one, a record of an accident at Guangyuan paper. And you know what? The detail, it's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, you're right. It's not exactly light reading, but I do appreciate the thoroughness.
Absolutely. And that's key, even if it's, well, unfortunate events. This kind of documentation is how we dissect what happened,
Yeah.
figure out the why, and hopefully stop it from happening again.
Right, so it's not just about having a paper trail, it's about deciphering the patterns, the underlying issues.
Exactly. Think of it like putting together a puzzle, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Each report is a piece, and as we fit them together, we start to see this picture emerge. And that picture, that's Guangyuan safety culture right there.
Okay, so let's unpack this puzzle, shall we? The first thing that jumped out at me was just how many of these reports mentioned shoddy equipment or just
Sure.
like the wrong tools for the job.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Like Wei Baizu's accident with the pump, using a rope instead of a proper sling. That's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Huge red flag. A sling, see, it's designed to distribute the weight properly, especially for heavy machinery. A rope, that's just, well, it's asking for trouble.
And the consequences were,
Severe.
yeah,
Smashed face, broken teeth. That's what we're talking about when when those shortcuts are taken.
it's a stark reminder, for sure. And it's not an isolated incident either. Yuichi and that chain snapping, hitting his eye, again makes you wonder about the equipment, how it's being maintained. The chain breaks, they fix it, it breaks again in the same spot. That says something, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you wonder if they, truly understood the problem, the forces at play, or if there was this pressure to just patch it up and get things moving again.
Rush to resume work. Saw that phrase pop up a few times in these reports.
Yeah. Zhang Helang going back to work after slicing his hand open on that dryer blade, Chen Guanyu back to the same grinder that took a chunk out of his finger.
Doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it?
Makes you question their priorities, right? Is it all about productivity at the expense of, well, basic well-being?
Mm-hmm.
These reports alone can't tell us, but it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely a cause for concern. And then there's the whole issue of safety protocols, or rather the apparent lack thereof in several of these incidents. Particularly with the grinders, it seems like basic safety rules were just ignored.
This is classic, It's the difference between having a rule book and actually building a culture of safety. Anyone could tell someone, hey, don't put your hand near a grinder. But without the training, without someone overseeing, really driving home the risks,
Yeah.
those words are meaningless.
It's like common sense goes out the window when no one's watching, or when there are no real consequences. Speaking of which, how does Guangwin respond after these incidents? Do they acknowledge these potential systemic issues we're seeing?
Well, to their credit, every single report does outline corrective actions. Replacing the faulty equipment, more training, updating their procedures. On paper, at least, it looks like they're trying.
So they're checking the boxes, but are they actually implementing these changes? Are they really committed to creating a safer work environment?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, these reports alone can't answer that. We see the to-do list, but the follow-through, that's the missing piece.
This is where things start to get really interesting because these reports, they're just snapshots. They're missing a lot of context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're looking at individual trees, but to get the full picture, to understand the health of the entire forest, we need to zoom out. We need more information.
We've been going through these incident reports, and I don't know, I'm getting this vibe like Guangguan's more interested in reacting to accidents than actually preventing them.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like they're always one step behind, putting out fires instead of preventing them in the first place.
Exactly. So how do we measure that? We've got these incident reports, but those are just the things that went really wrong. What about the near misses, the almost had it moments? Those could be really telling, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Near-miss reporting, that's a cornerstone of a good safety culture. A pipe almost falls, someone nearly trips on a wet floor, a machine acts up but doesn't actually hurt anyone. Those are warning signs, little whispers that something's not right.
So more near-miss reports could actually be a good sign, right?
Yeah.
Means they're actually being reported, dealt with.
Exactly. High number of near misses, but low number of actual accidents. That tells me someone's on top of things. Employees feel safe speaking up. Those reports are taken seriously, actions taken. What's worrying is when you see very few near-miss reports, but lots of accidents.
Because people are too scared to speak up.
Or they don't think it'll make a difference, which, looking at some of these incidents,
Yeah.
makes you wonder. We don't have any data on near misses in these reports, though, do we?
Nope, it's a missing piece for sure.
Yeah.
Hard to judge how effective Guangyuan's safety program really is without it. Like, imagine trying to figure out if a forest is healthy just by looking at the dead trees, you know?
Need the whole picture. Exactly. Speaking of, that incident with the truck driver, Shi Shunkin, the one securing the shipping container, he wasn't even a Guangyuan employee.
Right. He was a subcontractor.
And he still got hurt on their watch. Which brings up a whole other layer of responsibility, don't you think?
It's not just about their own workers, then. It's about anyone who sets foot on their property.
Visitors, contractors, delivery drivers, the whole 9 yards. If a company's serious about safety, that attitude needs to extend outwards. Clear communication, proper training, and they got to enforce those rules no matter who you are.
It's like the safety culture. It has a ripple effect.
Exactly. And a strong safety culture, it doesn't just appear overnight. It takes time, buy-in from everyone, top to bottom. You have to make safety part of the company's DNA, not just a list of rules.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? Is it more training, tougher inspections? What's the secret sauce?
Those things help, but at its core, it's about shared responsibility. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe speaking up, no matter what their position is, where they trust that their concerns will be heard.
So it's less about ticking boxes, more about changing the whole mindset.
Exactly. And that brings us back to these incident reports. They're a starting point. They show us where things went wrong. But they're just one piece of a much bigger, more complex picture.
It's like we spent all this time poring over these reports and we're still left with more questions than answers, you know?
It's true, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means we're thinking critically, not taking anything at face value. We've got some pieces of the puzzle, but the big picture, the why behind it all, that's what we're still working towards.
Right. So for our listener who brought us these reports, where do they go from here? What are the next steps in this investigation?
Well, I'd be curious to see how Guangyuan stacks up against the rest of the industry. Are these accident rates normal, or are they outliers?
Okay, so benchmarking. See if this is a Guangyuan problem or a paper industry problem or somewhere in between.
Exactly. And beyond just the numbers, I'd want to take a closer look at Guangyuan's actual safety program. What kind of risk assessments are they doing? How often are they reviewing, updating their procedures, their training? Are they proactive or just reacting after the fact?
Putting out fires versus preventing them.
Right. And speaking of prevention, we talked about near misses, but is there even a system in place to track those? Do employees feel comfortable reporting those almost accidents, or are those just swept under the rug?
Because a culture of silence, that's not exactly a recipe for a safe workplace.
Not at all. And, we spent all this time analyzing these reports, but sometimes the most valuable information comes from, well, the people on the ground. I want to talk to the employees themselves at all levels, hear their thoughts on safety, how it's perceived, how it's enforced.
Get a feel for the day-to-day reality, not just the official version. Well, this has been quite the deep dive. Eye-opening for sure. So for our listener who brought us this case, what's the key takeaway here? What do we want them to remember?
I think the biggest thing is these reports, they're a starting point, but they're just one small piece of a much bigger story. To really get to the bottom of what's going on at Guangwan, it takes more than just reading incident reports. It takes asking the tough questions, digging deeper, and most importantly, listening to the people who are actually there day in and day out.
Because everyone deserves a safe workplace, and sometimes it takes a bit of digging to make sure that happens. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.